Okay, so today we will be looking at importing image sequences using layer modes and some effects and text on a path. Okay, so first of all, we will start with importing an image sequence. So if I click on my project window and go to my image folder, I'm going to select the first image of this sequence, and you can see that this sequence runs in order numerically and there is no break. So I'm going to click on the top image here, and if you go to the options, you'll see that it has JPEG sequence selected automatically and it will import as footage. So I click on open and you can see that we have an image sequence here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new composition and I'm going to call it layer modes. And you can see here we've got 1920 by 1080, 25 frames per second, and a black background color. I'm going to go OK. And I'm going to just tidy up my project window and I'm going to make images, comps, oops. And I'll just drag that out and movies. Ooh, I can't spell. Okay, so this is going straight into my comps folder and this to my movies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my image sequence and I'm going to drag it down to the timeline like so. And as you can see, it's quite a large image, a large file. So if I press Command minus, I can see exactly how big this is. And then on my timeline, I can click on S and I can just reduce it. And you could even kind of move it so it's you see different areas of it. I think I might do that for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. But I also want to stretch it because at the moment it's only a second and a bit. So if I click on these little lines here, and if I go to columns, stretch, I can now see this. And I'm just going to click and drag out. So I've got a much longer file. If I select the layer and I just click on Command D, which is duplicate, I'm going to do that a couple of times. And then I'm going to make some of these longer, some shorter. You could also drag them to the left so that they start at a different point. Make this one a lot longer. I'm going to actually take this one and I'm going to move it so we see a different part of the image. So what I'm going to do now is use layer modes to mix the images together. So the layer modes are situated here in toggles and switches. If I click on that, then you can see here it says mode. And you have, if you click on that, you have a long list of these different effects called layer modes, which basically are about kind of the behavior between two layers when you mix them together and how the colors and the light behaves. And each one basically does something different. And it's just good to kind of experiment with them. These are all the darker ones. These are the lighter ones. These ones here. So I'm going to just start with multiply, bit of overlay, add. So I might just use a bit more multiply. It's quite good. So you get some quite nice effects. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it about here and press N. And then when I watch it through, got some quite nice effects appearing. It's quite experimental. So now that I've done this, I'm going to add an adjustment layer. So I go layer, new, adjustment layer. And I want this to go on top of all of my layers. So the adjustment layer is an invisible layer that you can add effects to, which will affect all of the layers beneath it. So you could have layers above it. So I could actually drag this here. So it would only affect these layers beneath it, but I'm going to have it affect all of them. So it goes on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add effect, color correction, hue and saturation. And if you scroll around this wheel, you can see how it changes the colors. So I'm going to open up this adjustment layer here. You can see the effects controls here and also in the timeline. So if I start at 0 seconds and I click on channel range to add in a keyframe, I'm then going to just scroll around the wheel, and every time I move it a bit, it adds a keyframe. And until I get to the end, and then it's gone through the whole spectrum of colours. So then I'm going to also add another effect. Blur job in. How about a radial blur? So what we're going to do here, if you look in the timeline, we can keyframe the amount and the center. And I'm going to increase it. And if you click on the center here, we can keyframe that. Move this point so the blur moves with it, this actual point. Okay, so that's from your adjustment layer, and obviously that means you don't have to put effects on every layer, and you can just turn it on if you want to, or turn it off. Okay, so again, if you want to render this file, you would just go to composition, add to render queue, and where it says lossless, you just click here and go to upper ProRes 422. Okay, and then we're going to save it to I'm just going to save it here in the My Exports folder and save it as layer modes, and then I'm going to click on render. Okay. Anyway, you don't really need to watch this, so I'll just stop that. As long as you know how to render it, that's the main thing. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is make a new composition. So if you click on this arrow here, I go back to project and then click on create a new composition, and I'm going to call it solid here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new solid layer. So layer, new solid. It doesn't matter what color it is. And I'm going to add an effect, which is called 4-color gradient. So you go effect, generate 4-color gradient, and it brings up this. So if you open up in the timeline, you can see 4-color gradient. And I'm going to keyframe all of these along here. like so. So this is my start point. And then as I move down the timeline, I'm going to change the position and the color. Okay, so I'll start with the colors. I'm going to click here and I'm just going to randomly select colors. So you can move along here, purpley. Weird orange. Okay, and then I'm going to move these points here. Oops. Just be careful to get the center of it, otherwise it moves the whole layer. Like so. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to change the color. Red. And this one. Maybe dark purple would be interesting. And then I'm going to change these points again. Like so. So we've got some nice movement and color changing, shifting around. So if I wanted this to be a lot slower, what I can do is I can select all of the keyframes like this with the arrow and press Alt, and then I can just click and drag them out to make this last a bit longer, like that. Okay. And then got some nice movement. It's nice and slow. This makes a really nice background. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new text layer. So I will get my text tool here and click on this window. And I'm going to write my name. And if you want to change the font, you can double click here. And then if I click on this window, I can just scroll through. Oh, there's something that I like. I might just go back to Futura. Yes, and I'm going to just make it a bit bigger. Here, perfect. So now I'm going to make a path. But what you have to do, you have to make sure you click on the text layer, so that's highlighted. If you don't, you'll just make a shape layer. So now I pick the pen tool, and I'm going to make a nice smooth path. So what you need to do is just do one click to put in the first point of the path. And then next time you hold down the mouse and you kind of move the arrow away. So you create this handle. So you kind of click, hold down and drag. It's just good to kind of practice playing with these handles and putting in lots of points. Okay. So if I wanted to, I could go back and it's just good to kind of get control, because when you start masking, you'll need to do lots of this. So I've got my path, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach text to the path. So you open up your text, you open up your path options, and you select mask 1. So there's my text on here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make my text move across here. So I'm going to bring the timeline marker back to 0, and I'm going to drag it. If you just use your mouse, it's quite slow, but if you hold down Shift and then drag, it goes a lot faster. So I put in the first keyframe here, and then I'm going to go to like 10 seconds, and I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to just drag the other way. So it's just there. So if I go through here, I've got the movement here. So if I press play, there it goes. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do now is just to show you some of the tools you have in Animate. So I can click on this little button here, and I'm going to choose some of these options to animate. I'm going to start with scale. So it automatically brings this up here. So if I click on scale here, and I'm on my stopwatch, and it automatically gives me a keyframe. So I'm just going to increase it a tiny bit, and then I'm going to just bring it down a bit. So it's quite small. I'm just randomly messing about with that scale option. Here we go. And then I'm also going to change the color, fill color, RGB. I'm going to start whites here and click on that to give me a keyframe. And then I'm going to change it to yellow at this point here. Oops. Kind of green, not yellow. And then I'm going to change that to orange. Okay. And then I'm also going to do my tracking. So you can have a look at these here and experiment with them. I'm just going to use tracking. I'm going to keyframe the tracking amount. So I've clicked on the stopwatch, it's given me a keyframe, and now I'm going to mess about with my tracking. And I'll reduce it a bit. And it still comes off at the same point. Okay, so we've got a bit going on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a path with and add an effect to it, add a stroke effect to it. So I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to make, also I need to save it. I haven't saved it for a while. I don't think I've saved it at all yet. So I'm going to save this project as, I'm going to call it text on a path. Okay, so now I'm going to make a new layer, layer, new, solid. Doesn't matter what color it is. And I'm going to make a new path. Okay, doesn't matter what kind of path it is. And now I'm going to add an effect. So I go Effect, Generate, Stroke. So this brings that up in this panel. And I'm going to increase my brush size. And I'm going to increase the spacing so it's a dotted line. And then I'm going to change it to on transparent. And that way I can see everything else. So now what I want to do is to animate my line so that it appears. So you can either do that here in the timeline, or I can do it here. So I'm going to just animate and these values here. So it begins from left and it goes to right, like that. Okay, so here's my beginning point at 0, and I move down the timeline to where my title, my name, has just moved off, and I'm going to bring that all the way to 100%. So now this has moved all the way across. And I'm going to end it here, so that when I render it, my composition only renders to this point. So I press N, and then when you can see these double arrow here on the grey bands, I click on there and go to Trim Comp to Work Area. So now when I play through here, we can see all of that. So I'm going to go Composition, Add to Render Queue, Lossless, and I'm going to see QuickTime, select Apple ProRes 422, okay, okay, and then just check it's saving into the right folder, okay? And then you press Render. And I think that is everything for today. Okay, and make sure you save it before you finish. Save and close. Okay, thanks.